I got a question for you today, church. How's your soul? Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be asking ourselves this question, and we're going to be looking at what are some healthy rhythms that we can put in our lives, and what are some unhealthy rhythms that we can take out of our lives. I love this question, how's your soul? Because it elicits a deep response. This isn't the kind of question that you want to ask when you're at work and you're walking over to the copy machine and you stick your head in someone's cubicle and say, hey, how's your soul? It's not one that you can just say, great, fine, how are you? How your soul, guys hate it, by the way, because they can't just say, I'm fine, how are you? Like a Cro-Magnon man. It requires a response that transcends something that is hourly, like hungry, maybe for Taco Bell, I don't know. It transcends something that's daily, like frustrated or angry. It even transcends something that's weekly, like frustrated, tired, sleepy. How's your soul is not an outward thing, that it's an inward thing. Sometimes outward indicators we use to say, how's your soul? So if I ask you, gentlemen, for a second, I'm going to pick on you because I is one. And I'm going to ask you, if I say, how's your soul? Our first mind goes to our thought is, how are things professionally? No, that's not your soul. And so I want us to look today in particular at one type of a habit that has infiltrated areas of our life. I believe it is an overcorrection. And here is the title of the sermon today: The Problem with Cancel Culture. The problem with cancel culture. Now, if you're over the age of 45, I'm going to define what cancel culture is for you. I got this from the very reliable source of Wikipedia. What is cancel? That was as much sarcasm as I could pour on that. What is cancel culture? It's the practice of withdrawing support from individuals or companies who have done or said something offensive. Now, I'm going to navigate this carefully, because there are some things that God does want to eliminate from your life. Cancel culture really became in vogue during the Me Too movement, if you're familiar with that. And then it kind of spilled a little bit over into Bud Light, if you're familiar with that. Not with Bud Light, but with what happened at Bud Light. Or maybe both, I don't know. It's a good thing I think I'm funny, because no one else does. And then the last one is it really spilled a little over into Target. If you remember, we canceled Target because of what type of clothing they had for children. And so cancel culture is when you withdraw support from things. Again, sometimes it's justified. But here's what I want us to ask ourselves today. Is there a difference between pruning and canceling? See, in our lives, God will prune things. He will eliminate people, friend groups, jobs, situations. He will cut those out of your life, or at least ask you to. But the purpose of pruning is so that you will grow more and bear more fruit. Cutting out of our life is when we take things out of our life because they don't serve us, because we don't like them. So then what happens is we fall into the habit of every time we think something doesn't benefit us, we remove it. And what we do is we have all these little micro divorces from all of these different things in our life. How many churches have you been to in the last 4 years? How many friendships have you have of people that you don't respond to their texts anymore? How many jobs have you gone through? How many times have you been offended? What is going on in your life? How is your soul? And what I want to do is today present this idea that perhaps maybe we overcorrected, because we are quick to cancel people and cut them out of our lives. And I ask you this: do we serve a God that cancels people and gives up on them for actions and removes them from their life? If you know me, well, you know that I have a dog. And if you know me really well, if you don't, you will, you'll love me. But you'll know that I don't really like my dog. I've never understood why we as humans make it culturally acceptable to take animals and bring them into our home. They're animals. And then we wonder why they poop and they pee and they shed all over the house. And it's like, duh, animal. And for those of you people that let animals sleep in your bed, what is wrong with you? There ought to be a special altar call at the end for you. Repent and turn from your ways. It's an animal. Now, some of you are offended at that. Just wait 20 more minutes. There's more coming. But here's what's weird about my dog. It's obsessed with me. It's just the meaner I am to it. It's like Stockholm Syndrome. It just wants more and more and more. Like it will come, I will walk in the door. I left. I go out and get the mail. I come back in 30 seconds later, and my dog's like, "Where have you been? It's so good to see you. I love you." And it'll bypass my kids who are great to it. It'll come straight to me, and I don't even like it. I yell at it. Sometimes I kick it. Not hard. I don't appreciate it. Yet it thinks I'm the greatest thing in the world. There's a great quote, and it's a prayer, and it says, "Lord, help me be the person that my dog thinks I am." Oh. Don't be distracted by my charm and charisma. There's a deep spiritual truth here. What if you and I treated people in the church like my dog treats me? It loves me not because of what I do, but because of who I am. And even if it's been mistreated by me, every time it sees me, it's like, "Where have you been?" It's so, I gotta be around you. I gotta sit by you. I gotta stare at you the whole time. And I wonder in the church world, what if we treated each other that way? No matter what you've done, no matter how you're acting, no matter what it's been, I'm here for you. I'm your biggest fan. It's the opposite of selfishness. You can't be egocentric and be this way. I read some excerpts from this book. It's not a great book, pretty boring, but I'm bringing you the best parts of it. I'm like that kid in class that, like, we were in a group project and I did all the work and you got the A because you've done nothing. I read this, all right? I'm just giving you the good parts. It was coming out of Cornell University. It's a guy by the name of Carl Pilmer, and he did this study and wrote this book. And what he found is in 2020 that 27% of all Americans are estranged from at least one family member. 27% of all Americans have cut off ties with at least one family member. Now, again, I'm treading this lightly because in some instances there is pruning that is necessary. Abuse, trauma, repeated betrayal, that's not what I'm talking about. And out of the 27%, the highest percentage, and it's not even close, are white people under the age of 35. In fact, if you look at some minority cultures, and Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans, the idea of cutting off a family member doesn't exist in their culture. Now, I'm not on TikTok because I'm in my 40s. If you're in your 40s, you shouldn't be on TikTok either. Somebody just said, "I'm in my 50s, I'm on TikTok." Well, again, that's up to you. There was a hashtag toxic family, and it was viewed in 2 years, it was viewed 1.9 billion times. And basically the premise is here's toxic things that my family members do, therefore I'm never speaking to them again. And so this is trending younger. And I ask you, is it good for a healthy soul? My wife and I, we just celebrated 19 years of marriage, which is weird because I got married when I was 8. Some of you are like, carry the one. That's not possible. 19 years of marriage, and here's what I ask you, those of you who have been married a long time. Does cancel culture exist in a marriage? Because in 19 years, I've lied to her. I've betrayed her trust. I've said things that are unforgivable. But how do you think we got through 19 years? Because we're going to grow together rather than get out. We're going to get through this. And you know what happens? After 19 years, I have seen God work in her life. She has seen God work in mine, and I have seen him work in our marriage that I never would have seen if I would have canceled it and got out and made it about me. Did you know the reason that there's a thing called marriage is not to make you happy? Clearly. It's not. And you're like, well, okay, it's to serve my wife or my husband. It's not. You need to do those things to make it work. The point of marriage is to bring God glory. It's that when people see your marriage, they recognize a character trait of God. And even if they don't know God, they're around you and your spouse and they're like, okay, I see God. So if we are followers of Christ and our lives are living examples pointing people to Christ, do we serve a God that cancels people? Question. How does it impact your marriage? How does it impact your job? How does it impact society? How does it impact churches? How does it impact friendships if we are constantly in it till it's not good enough for us anymore or not good for us, or we are offended or something happens that rubs us the wrong way and we move? We like that as long as we're on the side of the one who gets to decide what we're canceling. But I don't know about you, but I have been on the other side before where one action made somebody give up on me and they'll never return my phone calls again. And all I want to do is forgive them and ask for forgiveness and tell them that I've learned, and they won't even respond. I get blocked. Now, when you're on that side, that hurts. Because you're like, what about all of the times that we had and all it took was one time and now you're done with me? So then you and I decide that we have to be like this perfect version of ourselves, and we're always worried because if they saw who we really were, they would leave us. Is that good for our soul? I'm always interested in training up the generation behind us because I believe there's more than just you in your life. You're setting an example and working on training the people behind you. And so I wanted to know, what is cancel culture? What effect does it have on the next generation? And I've read this study. It was very long. But again, I'm the guy in your group project. I did all the work. It's out of Newport Academy. They're a teen center that deal with mental health issues amongst teens and substance abuse. And they did this study. And what they discovered is that teens, high school, middle school, all the way down to some kids in second grade, are mentally affected drastically with this constant fear of being canceled. Listen to what their study says. I'll have it up on the screen. They says that brain imaging studies show that social rejection literally hurts. It lights up the same parts of adolescent brain that are activated by physical pain. Being socially ostracized, meaning cut out, not welcomed, at an age when peer connections are incredibly important, is devastating. Outside of social media, cancellation can also happen in real life, at school or in activities outside of school. Canceled teens are often left out, snubbed, bullied, ignored, and isolated. Many therapists report treating teen clients who suffered from depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts for months after being canceled by peers. Teens who experience this may struggle for years to trust themselves, to trust others, and to feel a sense of belonging in a peer group. What we're seeing is, and the data is showing it, is that we are training up a generation behind us that is so afraid that one action is going to get everyone around them to just cut them off and dismiss them. When you are young, being connected and being accepted is paramount. It's more important than anything. So really what the data is showing in the church world is that our actions and society moving in this direction is actually making kids cowards rather than courageous, because they're not willing to stand up for what is right because the fear is debilitating of being ostracized and cut out by all of their friends, being canceled. So compromise after compromise after compromise, and where do you think they're learning this from? How's your soul? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Are we ever going to get to the Bible? What is this, a TED Talk? Well, if you've been here long enough, of course we're going to get into the Bible. In fact, we're going to be in the book of Acts. So if you find the Gospels, go one page over and you will be in Acts. And I want to show you a portion of Scripture that I have titled, I haven't read this in anything else, I don't think this is what it's called, it's just Jason's title of it, The Cancellation of John Mark. If you are taking notes, The Cancellation of John Mark. We're in Acts chapter 15. And as you're finding it, verse 36, by the way, as you are finding that, let me set up for you what's happening. So we have the Apostle Paul. He's fixing to go on his second missionary journey. Missionary journey is when he goes around and visits all of the churches and plants them or checks in on them and encourages them. He's getting ready to go on his second missionary journey, and he's putting together his all-Madden team. He's picking who he wants to bring, all of the studs, and he's mapping out how he's going to get there and who he's going to bring and who he's not going to bring. And he decides to bring Barnabas, the encourager. And Barnabas wants to bring his cousin, John Mark. But listen to what happens. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns we preach the word of the Lord and see how they are doing." Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them. Now, if you'll notice in verse 37, that word wanted doesn't translate into English super well. It basically means like persistent or determined. Like Barnabas was like, hey, we're bringing John Mark. We're bringing John Mark. Do you have any children that are persistent? They're like, when am I going to get this? When am I going to get this? When are we going to do this? I'm hungry. Are we there yet? Are we there then? And you're like, shut your mouth. That's kind of the idea. So it was driving Paul crazy, who's a bit of a curmudgeon, and he's like, all right, I hear you. Can we bring John Mark? Can we bring John Mark? Can we bring John Mark? And listen to what he says, verse 38. But Paul did not think it was wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. Scripture doesn't actually say what happened right here. Scripture just says that something happened on the first missionary journey in which John Mark deserted Paul. Now, people have different ideas. Could be something to do with the Jerusalem Council. Could be something with he's angry that Gentiles have now the same access and rights as Jews. We don't know what it is. But something happened, and Scripture implies that John Mark was in the wrong, and he left, and he bailed, and he deserted Paul. And Paul cancels him. Why would I bring him again? Look what he did last time. The cancellation of John Mark. Verse 39 again, they had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. This word sharp disagreement, this phrase, again, not great in the translation. It actually means heated, angry, almost violent. Like this was a problem. And I love that Dr. Luke included this in Acts because I don't know if you know this, but sometimes church people, they get in disagreements and both parties act in a foolish way. Not this church, the church down the street that you came from, but this church, sometimes people don't act the right way. And so Paul cancels John Mark. He does not bring him. I'd like to tell you that this ends with a pretty little bow on it, but it doesn't. Barnabas took John Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. They part ways. They don't reunite. Paul and Silas, they go to Syria, and Barnabas and John Mark head to Cyprus. We don't know what happens. But my heart breaks just a little bit for John Mark because he made a mistake. And some of you have made mistakes. But he's wanting to keep going. And Barnabas, the encourager, he's like, you know what? I know he messed up, but I see something in this kid. I think God's not done with him yet. Where we as humans dismiss people. Go back and read the Old Testament of some of the people that God used. We would cancel them out of church immediately. Go read what Moses did. What about King David? My gosh, the modern church today would have canceled those dudes and never used them again. What's amazing is that John Mark grows in the Lord. He becomes a disciple of Peter, follows him. He even writes the gospel called Mark. That's John Mark. Look how God used him. And Paul almost missed it. In a world of people who dismiss people so quickly and give up on them, can we be Barnabases? Well, it's like, I know that you've done this, but I see something in you. I don't think God's through with you yet, so neither will I. I will make room for you. We don't hear again about what happened between Paul. We don't know if they ever reconciled. We don't know what happened. We don't know if they went out to coffee and talked it out, had a bro hug. We have no idea what happened, but there's one last thing. It's a small little verse in 2 Timothy that we see how it ended. And it's been hidden right there. We've probably never even noticed it. It's in 2 Timothy. And it's in chapter 4. But what you have to understand about 2 Timothy is that Paul is in jail. Some theologians say he's got hours left to live. And what I love about the heart of Paul, this is old man Paul now, years have gone by, is that even into his last breath, he's writing letters to young men in ministry who are trying to pastor a church. I don't know if you know this, pastor a church ain't easy. And he's writing to Timothy. It's a second letter to Timothy, and he's telling him who to avoid, what mistakes not to make, and who to make sure that he brings to his side to learn from. Years later. And listen what Paul writes. Get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in my ministry. See, Paul, I think, learned from his cancellation of John Mark. I think he learned a lot about grace. I think he learned a lot about forgiveness. Some of you may need to make a phone call this week. Some of you might be able to be like Paul and learn a lesson on grace and forgiveness. Doesn't mean that you have to bring them back into your life, but what forgiveness means is you let God be God and understand that you and I have been forgiven of a lot. How can we not forgive others? I want to end our time today by telling you just something I've been thinking about lately. This month is 4.5 years now that my family has been here at Center Point, and I was thinking about like what this journey has been, and I was remembering the time I had what we call preview weekend here. It's really quite cruel. You bring a guy in, he preaches, and then everyone votes yes or no. Like yes or no if we think you're worthy of having this job. Like dance monkey dance, and we'll throw a tip in the jar. Like, my gosh, it's a lot of pressure. And I came in, and it was a Saturday night, and I preached. I think it was a fire message. I come back the next day, I preach again, second message. I mean, I might be biased. I think it was great. Then they called a church meeting that night. Some of you were there. We're out to dinner. Just put an offer in on a house, and one of the deacons calls me, and he's like, hey, it's going to be close, but I think we have enough votes to barely get a yes. And I'm like, I just bought a house. You have never told me it was this close. What proceeds to happen, church, is that people come right up on the front, right up here on this stage, and one at a time, people who have never met me, people who have never even listened to one of my sermons showed up to vote no. One man said that I was just chasing a paycheck. Fact check, I took a $15,000 pay cut overnight to come here. One person said that I was a hyper-Pentecostal masquerading as a Baptist and that I was going to turn this church into a quote-unquote circus. Never even met me. So quick to cancel. One person stood up and called me Joel Osteen, which I don't actually take as a put down. I'd love to have that bank account and that head of hair. It was really hard to face rejection starting off serving this place when we had given up everything. Just so you know, I passed by like 1 or 2 votes, and that's only because Steve Hines has 26 children. He probably had a 27th one while I was preaching. But it isn't about me. It isn't about the 20-something people that made up 3/4 of the church that left that night and never came back and took their tithe money with them. It isn't even about them. It's about those of you that stayed. There's even people in this church that voted no for me, but you stayed. And I want to honor you. You're dead to me. I want to honor you. You want to know why? Because a guy that looks like me and a guy that was going to take this church in the direction that we've taken it may not be your preference, but you prayed and God told you to put your purpose over your preference. And what you have seen over the last 4 years was something that we could never imagine. We had 7 kids my first Sunday here. We just opened up our 7th kids classroom at 3 services. And the people that were quick to leave missed it. A place that they love, a place that they served so faithfully, and they missed it because they misunderstood and thought it was about them. You see, you have to understand that God doesn't work in the drive-through, Amazon Prime, immediate, whatever we want. That's not how God works. He's not a microwave. He's a crock pot. And if you want to see God move, then you got to be a tree that plants yourself in a place, because you're going to grow way more fruit than a potted tree that moves from house to house and church to church and friendship to friendship and relationship to relationship. How much fruit do you want to produce? Do you want to see God move? Because he moves in seasons. The very last thing is I want to talk about your favorite subject. I want to talk about you. Some of you have been too quick to cancel yourself. You have given up on yourself because of what you have done. You may deserve it. You deserve hell. The unhealthy rhythm is cancel culture. The healthy thing that we're going to replace that with, write this down, is this phrase: play the long game. Unhealthy for your soul is to be so quick to cut people out, to move, to make it about you, to be egocentric, because what it does is you develop a habit of little micro divorces, and it bleeds over into your marriage, into your friendship, into your job. Rather than saying, God, where do you want me? You say, I'm going to be in this until it's not good for me anymore, and then I'm leaving. And we mistake things. We replace church hurt when it's really just accountability. We pretend that we forget that we're imperfect when we're friends with imperfect people. Replace it with play the long game. This may be hard to believe, but my first year that I was here was the first time I was ever a lead pastor, and I made some mistakes. But some of you said, we're going to play the long game with this guy because we see something in him and we believe that this is what God wants. I'll play the long game when it comes to you. I don't know what you've done, but I'll play the long game. Play the long game with yourself. Like, we're so quick to cancel ourselves and write off what we're capable of because we mess up. I say this all the time. It's not cliche. I genuinely mean it. You're doing better than you think you are, and God is crazy about you. And because of that, we will live different. We will walk different. Sit up taller. Hold your head up a little prouder, because you are a son or daughter of the Most High King, who is not embarrassed to call you a co-heir. Play the long game with your relationship with God and the impact he can make for you. If you were done, you'd stop breathing. But if you are breathing, you have a purpose. How's your soul? Feel a little better? Would you stand with me? As I was thinking about this time that we're, this 4.5 years here, I was just thinking, man, my grandfather was a preacher. When he died, I wasn't even like volunteering at a church. There was no evidence that God ran my life, because he didn't. I think, man, I wonder what my grandfather would say now. What would he think? What advice would he give me? My grandma said recently, she said, just so you know, he always knew that God would use you one day. He always thought you were special, and he never gave up on you. He always knew. I wonder who in our life will find out one day that we never gave up on them. But we never gave up on them. God hasn't given up on you. Don't give up on yourself. Make room in your head. Make room in your heart. And make room at your table.
Thank you so much for watching this video. It truly is an honor to be able to spend a little bit of time with you. I want to encourage you, if you want to keep up with all of the latest things going on at Centerpoint Church, you can subscribe to this channel. You can hit that bell for alerts so that you won't miss anything. And most importantly, if this impacted you in any way, I want to hear about it. We want to celebrate with you. We want to serve you. So if you go to centerpointtn.com, click on Contact Us, and we can't wait to get connected with you.